This recording is the property of the Unified Committee for Afro-American Contributions. Today we are interviewing Dr. James Forrest at his home at 23730 Hollywood Road in St. Mary's County. The interviewer is Bob Lewis. Today's date is February 25th, 2003. Tell me about your people and where you were raised. Start by saying, "My name is," and state your full name.
My name is James Alexander Forrest. I was born in southern Maryland, about 15 miles below St. Mary's City, and probably 10 miles above Point Lookout. I was raised partially by my great-grandmother, who was a former slave, who obtained her freedom at Point Lookout during the Civil War, emancipation before that. And
tell me more about her.
she was an Afro-American, purely Afro-American, no blemish of mixture in her body, as we could tell. Her master was a man by the name of Briscoe Smith from the Scotland area. And she tells us many tales of her slavery adventures, shall we say. And she used to relate to us many stories. And I suppose she, like many other people, maybe added a little bit here and there to make it a little more spicy. And we laugh about that. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But she was a very hard-working woman, She married a man by the name of Louis E. Bennett, who was also a former slave. And his owners were the Lilburns, John Gray Lilburn, from St. Inigo's, I think, from that area. Now, he didn't, in fact, she didn't tell us much about his emancipation, how he got free, I don't know. But my son, who is deep in genealogy, has done some research and found that he worked at Point Lookout during the Civil War. And let's see, what else now do we need to talk about her? Well, she and him both were the parents of 5 children, 3 boys, or 4 boys, and a girl. I don't know how it happened, and at that time when she was telling me this, my interest wasn't there. Now, if it had been now, I'd have probed a little deeper and found out more about it. But anyhow, he was a very, what would you say, entrepreneur. He owned 2 sailboats. He bought, and I don't know how he bought it, but he bought 9 acres of land down at just below a place they call Taylor's Hill, the road going down to Miller's Wharf. And he farmed that land, and he done commercial, what we'd call commercial sailing. I reckon he carried cordwood from this area to Baltimore, and he just carried anything that people wanted to ship up to Baltimore. And he had, well, I can remember as a child, we had a beautiful orchard, and he had a horse, I don't remember whether they had any cows or not. I'm not. She didn't tell me about that. But anyway, these are some of the things that I remember. Let's see what else about them. But I always tell people that she kind of laid the groundwork for me, gave me certain views of life and how it would be of a benefit to me if I'd follow some of those. She was very strict, very religious person. So was he. And just all around good people.
This was your great-grandmother, right?
Great-grandmother.
You said your great-grandmother told stories. Is there a story that is fresh in your mind?
Well, she, yeah, she told us a story that just at the time they were trying to escape from slavery to get to Point Lookout. The story has it that if you got within the Point Lookout boundaries where the camp was, they called it camp, but she always said it was a prison, where the Southern soldiers were brought there as prisoners. And she said there was a bridge that used to go across to get into the Point Lookout area. And she has related to us many times that there was a password you had to use. Now, how she got that, I don't know. But anyway, she used to always tell us that when you got to the gate, the guard would ask you, who goes there? And her response would be, friend to the guard. That advance friend and show your countersign. I don't know all about that, but that's what she used to tell us. And of course, we got a lot of kick out of that. As children, we would mimic her, and we'd say, who goes there? Friend to the guard, advance friend, and show your countersign. And got a lot of kick out of that. And I'm sure some of that was true, and some of it was probably handed down from somebody else.
Sounds like a fascinating person. And then she met your great-grandfather after she was freed?
Yeah, evidently. Now, she didn't talk too much about that, but I'm sure she did.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me an idea of when she was born and when they got married?
Oh, my goodness. We did some calculation because she said that she was a grown woman when, the Emancipation was signed. And we figured she was probably in her 20s, 21, something like that. And we figured that from the time she died in 1934, I think, or something like that. We figured she was in her hundreds. She was close to 100 years old. Of course, my mother was too. My mother was 101.
Okay, and did your mother and father live with you, or?
Well, my mother went away to the city. In those days, the work opportunities in this area were very minimal for young people who didn't want to work in the factories. And she went away to the city. She went to Detroit. And I stayed there with my great-grandmother. And she kind of guided me through life for many years.
And your father?
He was a waterman, too. He followed the water. Most of the area people in Ridge either followed the water or the factories. There wasn't any real large farms in that area. One or two, but very few. And if you were black, you worked in the factories in the summertime, and you followed the water in the wintertime. And that was our livelihood. That's where we made our living.
So as a young child, tell me about your day. What did you have to do around the house?
Oh, well, we had our chores to do. There's no question about that. See, we couldn't pull a switch and get light. Had to light a lamp. And if you wanted water, you either went to a spring or you drew it out of a well. No, none of the speaking business. Well, you had your hogs to feed, chickens to feed, wood to get in, wood to cut, water to get in before it got dark, and just chores that were natural to us. It just was something that everybody did. Everybody did the same thing. And of course, we went to school when it's time for to go to school. But that was a general pattern of life in my early childhood days. Then I went to, we had another gentleman who was a waterman who would come around and get youngsters and old people too to go to Eastern Shore to pick strawberries. So I went over there and worked for a while, picking strawberries in Eastern Shore, on Eastern Shore.
So, what did you eat when you were young, and where did the food come from?
Well, it was our stable food was we raised most of the food, like hogs and chickens, and we bought our flour from the store, of course, and had cornbread, and we had a garden, and most people in the lower part of the county in the early days raised most of the food. They had fish, chicken, hogs, and beans, of course, molasses. Those were some of the staple foods for the average person in St. Mary's County. Well, I don't say the whole St. Mary's County, but the lower part of St. Mary's County. I can only speak for that area. But I'm sure that area was same as other areas in the county.
So, how did you get along with your great-grandparents? Were you always a good child? Were you ever bad?
I don't think. I think all children are mischievous. And I don't think it depends on what you mean by good. We were devilish like any other child. We got into difficulties. But the correction system was much different than it is today. If you got in trouble and got caught, you had a penalty. You paid a penalty. And that penalty was a whipping. Sometimes a pretty good one. And there was always that reminder, if you do it again, you're going to get the same thing. So it was a kind of a stabilizer. But of course today we look at correction from a different point of view. You said, look, you ought to talk to the child and explain to the child that this is wrong, don't do this, and those kind of actions. See, in those days that didn't happen. If those elderly people looked at you kind of cross-eyed like, you better be careful, because something was going to happen. And did happen. And everybody worked in the same system. Wasn't no special area that it worked in. You could go in any household and you'd find some switches maybe sitting in the corner. And I can remember going to school, and the teacher there was a lady by the name of Cecilia Biscoe, and she'd call the switches the doctor. So the doctor might have to give you some medicine because you're sick. You look at those things now and get a kick out of it, but it was serious. There were serious consequences. And one other thing that we respected more, I think, we respected the elderly people. We kind of held them just a little above the fray. And I don't know whether that's good or bad. Sometimes I look at it and say, well, look, it's working, but maybe it would have worked better if you had to use different methods. But I don't know that. But I know it worked for a lot of us. She didn't have to get me out of jail. The jail was sitting in that corner. Yeah. You have a lot of memories of those days, and they were joyful. They were days that, and I don't know, in that era, it seemed like it was more peaceful. You just didn't have the tension that it is today. And I can understand that. You take we got a little grandboy here now, great grandson. He can tell you things about the moon and sky and stars. Hell, I didn't ought to know it was a moon when I was out and looked. But it's the advancement in technology is so much different now, and I think it's probably good. Yep.
So you say that children were mischievous, maybe you yourself was mischievous. Is there an incident that stands out in your mind you'd like to tell me about when you got in trouble?
Well, yeah, if you didn't do what you were told to do, there was consequences. I'll give you a little slight example, which today is trivial. But your parents sent you to the store. You had to go to the store to get feed for chickens or maybe get some flour or something from the store. And if you left home at 9 o'clock, she expected you to be back about 9:15, 10 minutes after 9. And if you stayed too late, they say you dilly dally along the road, there was a consequence to pay. You might have got a little warming up from behind. And things like that. It wasn't anything really serious, but it was serious enough for them to say you didn't do what you were supposed to do. I don't remember getting in any too many fights or doing things that would harm somebody. Just things that I did that I wasn't supposed to do, and that was it. Or you go to the spring, and you didn't come back when you're supposed to come back. You stop. See, I went to the spring, went to my neighbor's yard, and I'd probably stop there and play with the children a little while. And that was wrong. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to go to the spring, get your water, and come on back home. And that was the rule. That was. They made you understand that, one way or the other.
Now tell me about your brothers and sisters. You had brothers and sisters?
No brothers. A half brother, but no close brothers. When I say close, I only had a half brother. I was the only child of the only child.
You said your great-grandparents were very religious. Did you start going to church with them very young? And what?
Oh yeah, well, yes indeed. I don't know exactly how old I was when I started going, but I've been going to church ever since I can remember. And of course, in that area where I was born, mostly Catholics. And from a religious standpoint, it was much more of a structured religion than it is today, I think. You followed certain rules. I was an altar boy. I served the priest when he was saying Mass. I served on the altar as an altar boy. I remember doing that. And we went to church every Sunday. There was no question about that. You had to go to church on Sundays. That was something you just had to do. And it was custom. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, like somebody said, well, that's a great adventure. It wasn't no adventure. It was just something that people done. It was expected of you to do it. And that was it.
Did you ever go away on trips as a child? Can you tell me about maybe
Oh
traveling?
yeah, I lived in Baltimore for a while. And in the wintertime, sometime we would go up to my uncle's. And if we had any problems with the children, sickness like, we went to John Hopkins Hospital because my aunt worked at John Hopkins Hospital. And we just went in Baltimore. I sold papers in Baltimore on Monument Street. Had quite a adventurous young life. Then I lived in Detroit for a while. Sold papers in Detroit. Detroit Free Press. Yep.
When was that?
Oh, in Detroit, 1920, 21, 22, somewhere along that. I remember in Detroit, there was 2 Ford factories in Detroit, Highland Park and River Rouge. And I remember when I was a youngster I went to school there for a little while. The assembly line was something new back in those days. It was a novelty, and they had this long building, glass, where you could walk along the street and you could see the men working on the assembly line. And they're putting this car together as it went down the assembly line. Very interesting, very interesting. It started here, and when you get to the end, everything was together and she'd roll out. And I wonder sometime when I'm talking to people, as you get older, your mind plays funny tricks with you. And you wonder, did this really happen? Or am I imagining these things? I seem to remember the Prince of Wales coming over here and Henry Ford putting a Ford together for him. Now, historian people will check that and see if I'm right or wrong. I don't know. But it seems I remember that. And that was, we got out of school purposely for that activity. And it was quite interesting. And sometime when I'm here sitting by myself, I say, I wonder, did that really happen? Or am I just imagining these things from years ago? And things like that, after you get older, it'll happen to you too one of these days. Your mind will start saying, look, you sure you're right now, or you're just imagining things? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've done a lot of traveling as a family. I try to expose the children to a little different way of life. That's about the size of it.
So how did your great-grandparents, you said that if a child got really sick, they went up to Johns Hopkins, but what if they were a little sick? How did they care for
Well, we had doctors here. We had, but they weren't available like they are today. If you called, and of course there were a lot of old remedies that seemed to work. And I suppose it became a necessity because you couldn't reach a doctor and you had to, what they call, improvise. You got a cold, they had certain things that you could mix up, take it, and it would relieve the cold, no question about that. I kid the children now. I think we gave our children some. I'm not too sure. But what they call coal oil, they call it kerosene now. We used to call it coal oil. You put 2-3 drops of that in some sugar on a teaspoon, take it, good for sore throat, and it worked. A lot of little things. Mustard plasters put on your chest to relieve the congestion in your chest. And my gosh, there were some people who were very good at that, mixing. And you had people who, I'm trying to find a proper name to call it, but who had the skills of mixing these remedies that doctors did professionally. They did it because it was handed down to them from generation to generation. Said, this worked. Try it. It'll work. And that's the way we kind of halfway survived our medical problems. And if it got really bad, well, then you call the doctor and you call him today. He might come tomorrow or next day. And he'd probably tell you, do this for him until I get there. And that was where we survived. A lot of us survived. You can see I'm still here. Yep. All right. Didn't we give his children, huh? Well, I want you to put your fingers up.
I come in to see if you wanted a glass of iced tea.
No, thanks.
How about you?
No. Didn't we give children coal oil and sugar? I mean, coal oil and
Yes, for cough and sore throat.
what were you put on? Mustard plaster?
Mustard plaster. Make it. Of course, you used to buy dry mustard, and you put flour into it like a paste, and it would break, but you would have to leave it on a little while because it would blister. Because mustard gets hot.
What'd you do for headache?
Headache? Never had any headache. But that's what they used to give them when they had colds.
Mm-hmm.
Kerosene with sugar on it. Of course, now that was kerosene years ago, but you couldn't use this stuff for it fixed now. Yes.
See, I'm gonna have to call you every now and then to verify some of these things.
Well, I'm sitting in.
Okay, could you start with your the first formal schooling and just go through what your school day was like and what schools you went to, who your teachers were, and just kind of follow that through?
Well, I started my schooling in a Catholic setting down at St. Peter Clavers. And of course, in those days, they called it primer. That was the name of the first grade. And you got your ABCs and your timetables and basics. And then we went to all my schooling was in Catholic setting down in St. Peter's. And then when I got into 8th grade, then I went, I think it was 8th and 9th, something like that. Went over to Cardinal Gibbons Institute. That was a high school for black children, girls and boys, but it was non-denominational. It wasn't for just Catholics alone. It was for any child that wanted to go to school. And I think they went through the normal 4-year, I suppose you'd call it curriculum, I reckon. And nothing spectacular, nothing particular, just, we didn't think it was. But of course it was the only school in the early 30s. Well, that school was opened in 1924, I think. I think it was 1924. Only high school in the area for black children. There was no high schools here then. And we had children from New York, Boston, Chicago, all around. I think it was really an experimental school. It was basically for like an industrial school for farmers to be taught how to understand the land a little better, raise better crops, be more productive. We had a gentleman come in from Tuskegee, Alabama, named Victor Emmanuel Daniels. He was the principal down there. And his system was to educate you in a different way. In other words, thinking about raising crops. Instead of planting the same thing in the same field every year, what he called it, rotate your crops, diversification. And that was his philosophy. And in those days, it served a good purpose. Because we had been, I say we, our parents had been used to raising crops in the same field and just, you'd water the crop out, or water the field out. And he said, you got to change that. You got to change that. And he showed us a different way of life. That was the whole story. Just he had brought a new era of living in St. Mary's County for black people. It was rather interesting as I look back now, because we had a set pattern in those days, and we followed that, just follow the same thing. He said, look, it got to change. Got to change. And a lot of us changed.
Can you tell me who some of your teachers were at St. Peter Claver and at Cardinal Gibbons?
Yeah. The teacher that I knew best was named Cecilia Biscoe. And then I had another teacher named Lula Harper from up around Charlotte Hall area. And then we went over to, went out of that school into another Catholic school. It was taught by the sisters. I remember one of them named Sister Nunciata. And some of the others slipped my memory. Then when I went to Cardinal Gibbons, I remember some of the teachers. One of them was named, most of them was from Louisiana. Duchot, Marchand, Parnell, Ives. Those are some of the names of the teachers. That's been a long time ago. I can't remember all those. And of course, the dormitories had the board. See, it was a boarding school. You stayed right on the campus. It had dormitory for boys and dormitory for girls. Structured, very structured. He was a disciplinarian. Daniel was. If you didn't toe the line, you didn't stay there. He'd give you a bus ticket. Go back where you came from. Yeah, you sit and you talk to people, and they, of course, they can't relive the same thing that you're reliving, but, you know, you think about those things, and we thought as youngsters that he was very harsh. But when you look at it after you get a little bit older, it wasn't all that harsh. It was just something that had to be done. If you didn't follow it, you had to get a plane ticket or a bus ticket or some kind of ticket because you left there. Yep. Then, of course, I went to work after I come out of school. I went to work down at St. Mary's College. I worked there I reckon I worked down there off and on 4 years. I reckon I was down in Terra Centenary was 1633, I think. I went there then, 1633, when St. Mary's was, I don't know whether it was discovered or what, but anyhow, 1633 they had a Terra Centenary, 300 years of activities in St. Mary's County. And I worked there off and on for, I reckon, 3 years, I reckon, under a lady by the name of Adele France, another disciplinarian. She thought that, of course, it was all girls' school when I went down there. Boys, after later on, some boys could come there in the daytime, but it was strictly a female, what they call female seminary. And she thought that her method and her girls, nobody in St. Mary's County like them. And I don't reckon it was either. But you recall those things, and they were educational to you. You got a lot of information from that kind of what would you call it? Livelihood, shall we say. And of course, I stayed there. We boarded in, had 1 day a month off. And served a good purpose. I made a good living down there. Yep. I say a good living. It was, because wages then, $1 a day was top of the pot. A lot of people working. In fact, I work for 50 cents a day. And a lot of people in this area work for 50 cents a day. And when farmers, mostly they paid $1 a day. And when somebody came here from the city, I think it was a man by the name of J.J. Sullivan. He hired people and started paying them $2 a day. My gosh, they almost run them out of the county. Too much money. Too much money. A lot of things have happened in my travels that looks strange now, but it was a fact. There was no question about it. When he came through here and offered farm hands rather, $2 a day, that man must be crazy. Hey, gosh, $2 a day. Look at it now, $2 a day won't buy you a stamp. Yep.
You said you went to Detroit and delivered papers. You were still young then, at school age.
Oh yeah,
Did you go to
like
school
1920s and 20s, yeah.
Did you go to school there? And
Yeah, well, I wasn't up there very long. Maybe a year, maybe. I can't really recall how long I stayed up there. But it was in the 20s, because that's when I was telling you about that incident of Prince of Wales coming over here, and they put that Ford together for him. Of course, Henry Ford in those days, he was a powerful person. Them two factories going, I don't know, he had thousands of men working in them factories.
how are the schools different in Detroit than they are here?
They were not segregated. That's strange, but it's a fact. I went to school with white children in Detroit. Now, people don't recall that, but it's a fact. White and blacks all went to the same school. And I'm sure your historians could verify that. Yep. In fact, we lived in a neighborhood. We had a white family on this side. We lived on the other side. Of course, they were mostly in that 20s. They were mostly foreign. They call them foreigners. They came over here to work in the factories. Italians, Irish. And of course, the Jews had their stores and things like that. But in the factory and things, it was mostly black and white work side by side. And of course, when you came further south, it gradually changed a little bit. But up there in Detroit, it was. And I don't recall the segregation issue getting so, what would you say, prominent in Detroit. In later years, I'm sure it did, but I don't recall too much problems. Of course, maybe I wasn't cognizant of that fact, but I know I went to school with white children.
How did you feel about that, going there and being with white children and then coming home again?
You know, strange as it may seem, and this is from my perspective, you never really, it was a custom. And you never really put a lot of emphasis on that until later life. I don't know, I can't find a word that would fit what I want to say, but it was kind of accepted, expected, or whatever, and that's the way it was. And then, of course, later on, you start looking at this thing, there's something wrong here. You know, why should you be any different from anybody else? But you didn't look at those differences when you're young. I played with white children, didn't have no problem. Of course, like any other, blacks too, sometimes you'd say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing and have a little scuffle. But it wasn't, let's see, it was a different issue. You just thought that you're white and I'm black, and that's it. And of course, after you get old and start looking at things different, you attack them different. I know we had a white family that lived right next to us, and we played together all the time. Had a little scuffle, go back home. So next day come back and play again. And that's the way it was. But we knew it was, after we got a little older, we knew it was something wrong with the system. And of course, as you get older, you look at it different, study it, and say, well, look, this ought to be changed. Something got to be wrong. But when you're growing up, you don't think about those things in the same way you do when you get a little bit older.
Did you have a favorite teacher, a favorite subject, or a subject or teacher that you particularly didn't like that you remember?
I don't really remember a teacher that I didn't like. I really don't. And I'm sure some people did, but I never had any problem with teachers. They probably had a problem with me. I didn't have no problem with them. I liked history pretty good. I wasn't particularly good in any subject, but I got by. I got grades enough to pass, and I suppose that was all I was concerned about then. And of course, the man that I told you about a while ago, Daniels, he kind of wanted us to look at some of the finer things of life, like the arts and science. He told us about Socrates, Plato, Anaxagoras, all those philosophers. He wanted you to broaden your scope of knowledge. And he said, this is the way you do it. And then we studied quite a bit about Negro history. Men who had made a mark in life. Paul Laurence Dunbar, Phillis Wheatley, and my gosh, a host of others that I recall very well. And years ago when I was kind of more apt, think quicker, I had a lot of interest in black history. And he gave us that, he opened that little window. Said there's people of your race that has made progress in life. You ought to know about them. Like the man at Howard University. And he said you need to know about these people. Read the history of W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington. Yep.
You mentioned Howard University. It sounds like another part of your education. Talk more about that.
No, my only knowledge of Howard University was that we knew it was a high form of learning, and Daniels told us that. Mordecai Johnson, president of Howard University, he wanted you to know these people. I wasn't involved in Howard in no way, but he just wanted you to know that these people have made certain strides in life. They're not the buffoons that a lot of people thought you were. And he impressed you with that. Said, you can do anything you want to do if you put your mind to it. And said, I can prove that to you by this man, black as tar, as they said, but he's well informed, he's educated, and he knows certain things. He has studied philosophy, he studied the arts, and it doesn't make him any better, but just broadens his knowledge to the world. It was so important. And I don't know, I think maybe sometime some of us have lost that desire to be informed of certain activities that we've made progress in. See, we've done a lot of things that not been recorded. A lot of inventions, And I think we need to know that, and that gives you a pride in your race. That, look, here's a man just like you, same color, same features and everything. Look what he's done. He's made progress in life. Instead of being a nobody, he becomes somebody. And it just makes you feel better. I don't know whether everybody feels that same way or not. I can't talk for those people. But I know a lot of us do. And that's probably why they got that display down at the library. Let people know that there's people that they've contributed something. And through their contributions, they should be respected. And that's the way I see it. I don't know whether I'm boring you or not, but this is...
You talked about getting done with your formal schooling and working down at St. Mary's College for 3 years.
Three or 4 years.
Let's pick up there. What did you do after that?
Well, I went with the telephone company. Now, of course, in the summertime, after I left St. Mary's College, I went to work at a boys' camp at Point Lookout. I went out to Point Lookout, Pine Point, called the Meat Yards Camp, summertime. I worked there for a little while. In the summertime, when schools were closed, done a lot of waiting on tables and things of that nature. Then I went with the telephone company. But that was, I went to the telephone company probably this was contracting now. See, I worked telephone company on 2 different occasions. The first time I went with the telephone company was on contract basis, working for a contractor whose name was Harry Jones. He contracted work from the telephone company, and we did the work. All black, had a white foreman, but all the men the workers, linemen, were black. We built lines in St. Mary's County, open wild. I worked there with him for, I don't know, till the contract ran out. I don't know, it was 3 or 4 years, maybe, or maybe less. When that contract ran out, then I went to work at Indian Head, naval powder factory in La Plata. Not La Plata, Indian Head. And I worked there for, I reckon I worked there maybe 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure. These years come up on you so fast. Then I went to work for a C&P telephone company. We used to call them Mother Bell. Got a job working with them. And I was the foreman of that crew. Only black line crew in St. Mary's County. Charles County, Prince George's, and around. We worked from Point Lookout to in Charles, Calvert, a little bit of Anne Arundel, building lines. And then I worked with them for 34 years. Quite an interesting story on that too. That's a whole different buck. whole different story altogether. It was quite an experience. And of course things were segregated then. And we couldn't eat in restaurants and things in the areas that we worked. We had to eat in the kitchen or bring your own lunch. Segregation was in its highest form. I don't know about the highest form, but people recognized it more, and they were attacking it as unconstitutional, wrong, foolish, but it existed, so you had to deal with it. Or we've been to places where you want to get a sandwich. You said, "Yeah, I'll give it to you, but you get out the window. You can't come in there." And you started to wonder, said, you know, why is that necessary? Evidently it was. I suppose the laws were on the books that this is the way it should be. But if you really stop and consciously think about this situation, so foolish, expensive, and foolish, but it existed. And you kind of learn to deal with it, try to change it if you can, resist some of the things that happen to you, and say, look, I'm going to try to do something about this if I can. And that's the same principle in the school system. When it was getting rid of segregated schools, I was on the school board. I wasn't on the school board then, no. But I was in the school arena, and we were looking at things and said, look, something ought to be done. And we had some people who felt the same way we did, and said we ought to look at this thing not from an antagonistic way, but from a sensible standpoint. Said, look, why don't you look at this thing a little bit different? Look at it from my standpoint. Why should we be getting second-handed books when we're taxpayers? And those kind of issues came up, and we talked about them. And in my experience, now I can only go by my experience. I can't, an experience of the people that were with me or working with me. And we had a lady by the name of Lady Marshall Dent. You've probably heard of her. And I really believe she was a conscientious person. And of course, she, like any other person that has a job, she has to conform to certain guidelines. Now, you just got to be careful. If you go too far, you're out of line. But I think she was conscientious. We had many meetings, and most of them were closed because we weren't out to be rabble-rousers. We were out to attack the situation openly, fairly, and try to make the other fellow understand that what we're asking for is just justice, that's all. That's all we're asking for. And it worked out. We had meetings and we talked about how it's best to integrate schools, which grade it is best to start integrating first, which would cause the less interruption. And all those things were discussed openly and honestly, not with the club over your head and say, look, if you don't do it, I'm going to knock you in the head. And I think it worked out. I think it worked out pretty good. Of course, it didn't suit everybody, but I think it achieved a purpose, I think. I don't regret anything that I ever done. And I'm sure a lot of people didn't agree with everything I said either. But I don't think there's too many people just like me. I don't reckon. Hope not, at least. And I remember something else that happened, and I'm very proud of it. Charlotte Hall, for example. I was on the committee when the Charlotte Hall project came up. Charlotte Hall would have been sold to public developers had it not been for this committee saying, look, that's wrong. You oughtn't do it. You ought to look at it, check it out, and when you make your final decision, make sure it's the right one. And today you got a veterans home up there instead of a high-rise development. See, people, that's in the past. People never thought about that, but it's a fact. Actually happened, and if you don't believe it, you can look in your books and find out that did happen. A lot of things. I was on the hospital board. I worked on that with people who thought that certain changes ought to be made. But we gotta, sometimes run up against a brick wall, and if you can't go through it, you gotta go around it. and you achieve a purpose that's more productive than if you take a hammer and try to knock that wall down. So look, I can't go through, but I go around, I get the same purpose. And I don't know, some of those kind of things that and I say we with full purpose in mind, that there was a lot of we's in my experience in St. Mary's County, a lot of we's. And when people say, well, look, he done this, he didn't do it all. A lot of people who thought what he was doing was really right, and that's why we were following. I served on the school board for 10 years, 5 years as president. And I don't know, I think we got some things accomplished.
Can you tell me a little bit more about, you said you got involved with the schools before you were on the school board. How were you involved, and what put the spotlight on you?
Well, you see, in our involvement in those early days was a matter of money. See, books and things that the school needed, we'd go around and raise money for it. Put the money there so it could be available. I laugh at this. The children now laugh at us. My wife and some other people in the community put on a show to raise money. And I don't know what the money was for, but it was some purpose for the school. I remember the first playground equipment at Banneker was bought by not public funds, private funds. I was working for the telephone company, and the piece of equipment came in at a place up here called Forest Hall. Train came that far. I got permission from my boss man to put that equipment on the telephone company truck and bring it down and deliver it at school. That's how I got there. And those little things seem little now, but it was a big thing then for black children to have a piece of equipment that wasn't homemade. And those little things like that, I say, to look back at them now, and it don't look like much, but in those days it was very important.
Tell me more about how you got appointed to the school board and some of the things that you feel were important that you remember.
Well, maybe I got appointed to the school board because I opened my mouth. Maybe that's one reason. Because I just figured, well, look, if, I see something that wasn't exactly kosher, I'd say something about it. And I suppose somebody said, well, he's got such a big mouth, running his mouth all the time, maybe you ought to give him a job. So I reckon that's how come I get on there. And I was appointed by Governor Mandel, I think. And King, who was a superintendent after Marshall Dent, Robert King, I don't know, maybe I said something that he thought was right, and he said, well, put his name in the pot, see if they'll elect him. And that's what happened. I don't know all the particulars, but I know it was there. I don't have any magic, warm wave and say, look, put him on there. I don't know. It just happened. Same way at the Plume, I got down to St. Mary's City. Somebody said, well, maybe we ought to give it to him. I reckon he deserves it. And that's what happened.
So give me a time period when you were on the school board, and what was the school system like at that time that you were trying to change?
Well, it was really the beginning of integration. It was, I don't know the exact beginning, but it was during the time when the integration attitudes were changing. And other than that, I suppose, there's no particular incident where was global news. It was just a phase-in of the integration, and I happened to be there. And evidently when things came up, I voiced my opinion, and people thought it was right. But the people on the board thought maybe, well, let's look at this thing for seriously, and maybe it'll work. And that's what happened. I don't, you know, I would like to be a great historian and pretend to you that I have gone into this activities and I've made certain strides and I've done certain things to change these things. That it didn't happen. Didn't happen. Didn't happen to me. I don't know about other people, but it didn't happen to me. I didn't have no great awakening. I was just there. And evidently what I was doing or what I was saying must have had some merits because I got reelected again. So that's all I can say. You know, I wished I could say to you, Mr. Lewis, this is what I'd done. I'd moved this mountain and I'd done all this stuff. It didn't happen. It really didn't happen. It was just seemed like an even flow of things.
So during this time, especially down here in St. Mary's County, the southern county of the state, I think it must have been a very difficult time for the kids in the schools, maybe especially in the middle and the high school age. Can you tell me about how you felt about what the kids were going through? And
You know, I had kids. My youngest son was among some of the first to go to an integrated school over Chaptercon. And you know, I have to be honest with you. I don't see any great commotion. He went over there and he played football. And that was it. And that's the only way I can explain it. I wished I could pick out some particular incident and say, well, look, we had to march and force and do this and do that. I can't remember it. It didn't happen to me. And maybe somebody said, well, he was scared to get involved or he didn't get involved in these big pushes that were going on. Maybe it didn't, I don't know. But it just didn't happen. It just did not happen, that's all. And you might interview somebody else and say, well, it didn't happen that way with me. It happened different with me. Well, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But it didn't happen with me. It absolutely didn't happen. I remember, for example, when we were trying to be recognized or eat in places where we couldn't eat before. Remember the man who worked for him? And we were talking about going in there and having a meal. So I went to him and asked somebody and said, would you go? And I said, yeah, I'll go talk to him. I work for him. I ought to be able to talk to him. So I went in and talked to him. I said, we were just wondering if you would allow black people to come in here and eat. And he said, well, I don't know. I have to think about it. So we sat there and talked a little while. He said, I'm going to be frank with you, Jim. He said, I don't have no problem with that. He said, but I owe the bank mortgage on my place. And if I allow blacks to come in and eat, which I have no problem personally, but these other people who resent it is my livelihood. And I have to be careful how I antagonize them. Said, because they don't come here and eat, I can't pay my mortgage. Which was common sense. It made sense to me. I said, I understand you, but it's not right. I said, somebody has to, you know, kind of say, look, can't we figure this out somehow or another and make it work? And that's what happened. Bailey, the man's name was Bailey, who run the restaurant right where the pet shop is now. And I don't know, it just worked out. After a while, teachers started going in eating. It just worked. And now maybe somebody else that I don't know about maybe put some fire on them or done something different. But that was my role in it.
remember any other occasions when you took that very big first step, and like maybe you didn't want to go sit in the balcony at the movie theater, or were there any other incidents like that you can remember?
No, I don't think I got involved in the theater business, but I knew it was a balcony where black people sat. But now the funny thing about that is this, that people don't know. They had a movie over where Duke's, where the restaurant is, a French restaurant. The movie was upstairs, all on the same floor. Everybody went in the same, didn't go in the same door. We had to go around and go up the steps, but we all ended up in the same room. Of course, we had chairs across the back, where black people sat across the back, and white people sat across the front. But we were all in the same building, all on the same floor. Yep, strange things. And of course, that was the system. That was a system that was, for 100 years, had been accepted. And now all of a sudden you say, look, there's something wrong here. And conscious, anxious people started looking at this thing and said, look, this ain't right. It's just the same way, and I'm not going into that because it's out of my field. Just like the Army. My son had just come through that door a while ago. He served in Vietnam. He went somewhere, he dressed in his uniform and everything. He went somewhere in Florida and had a car. A man asked him, said, nigga, where'd you steal that car? There's a man fighting, dying for his country. And that animosity was there. And I'm 92 and I haven't been able to figure that out yet, why that is. But that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
Can you tell me something about the hospital? You mentioned being on the hospital board. How did African Americans...
It was segregated too. Hospital was segregated too, same thing. I don't know of any place in my travels in this area that wasn't segregated. When I say segregated, it was separate. In the hospital, I worked in the hospital as an orderly. I had rights because I was working. I could go anywhere I wanted to go. But they had two rooms, one for black and one for white, one for women, one for the men. And you went up the back steps. Didn't make no difference whether rain, snow, shine, or what. You didn't go in that front door. You went up those back steps to get into the hospital. And that's the way it was. That's the way it was. And I don't know what rule they used to operate that operation, but that's the way it was. That's the way it was. I worked under a doctor, young man named Dr. Welch, operator. He operated on people. I worked right in the operating room with him. Didn't have no special skills other than do what he told me to do. Hold people on the board when they were giving them ether. You know, you get a little restless when that. See, in those days you had a little, looked like a sifter. And they put over your nose and they dropped this chloroform or either whatever it was, and as you inhaled it, you went into a slumber. And of course, a little before you went into that slumber, you got a little restless. It was kind of strangling. You wanted to get out of there. And I used to have to hold them on the table. I've seen him operate on people. And I've had a lot of experiences. It worked out pretty good for me.
So take me from the time period of being orderly at the hospital to being on the hospital board.
Well, I say again that, if I could pinpoint and answer your question directly, I really would try. But these things just evolved. Somebody, maybe they wanted a black on there. Said, well, let's try him, see how he works. And I'm sure they said he's not too much of a rabble-rouser. And he's also speak his mind sometimes if you prick him too hard. So I said, let's try him, see what happens. And somebody put my name in a pot. And they called me and asked me, would I serve? I said, yeah, I'll take a shot at it. And I served on there for 7 years. So I'm just saying these things to you, Mr. Lewis, because I'm trying to be honest. I wish I could do something to give more glory to this interview, but I can't do it. I just don't have the ability, or I don't have the knowledge to make it more glorifiable. I'm just giving you the facts as they appeared to me, as I saw them. And that's it.
So when did you serve on the hospital board? Was that after segregation?
Oh, let me think. So many things happened. It was during that, the segregation was still going on. Yeah. I got the date upstairs, but I can't think of it offhand. But I know it's on there 7 years. And the only reason why I didn't serve my full 10, I missed too many meetings. I just got tired of meeting. I didn't go, and the man said, well, look, if you miss, I don't know, it was 3 or 4 meetings, then you're disqualified. And then after that, then I served on the well, they don't call it a financial committee, but I served again on the hospital board recently, within the last 5 or 6 years. And it's just somebody said, well, look, try Jim Forrest. He'd probably work all right then. And they just, somebody pointed me out.
So were you the first African American on the state school board and on the local?
Oh no, my goodness. There were, let me see, 5. There were 4 other blacks on it before me. Yeah, let me see if I can name them. There's Robertson Barnes, Leo Smith. I'm not Leo Smith. Leo Young, Raymond Hewlett. There was one or 2 more. They didn't stay long. And I don't know why they didn't stay, but they didn't stay. I probably stayed long the rest of them. But I wasn't the first one.
And how about the hospital board?
Let me see, was I the only one on the first one on the hospital board? I believe it was. I'm not too sure of that. I have to check a little deeper in there, but I think I was one. At least I was one of the first, if I wasn't the first. Mm-hmm.
So in your time on the hospital board, did you bring up issues about the segregated aspects?
Yeah, we talked about it.
Yeah.
And it was in the construction stage then, too. They were doing a lot of building. Yep. And it was a gradual phase, and all these things just, they didn't come, I don't recall, in this area. Now, maybe in the Lexington Park area, maybe they did things a little bit different. But I don't remember any marches in this particular area to bring the attention of these difficulties to the forefront. I don't remember any marches. Might have a little house session and said, look, we ought to. I think the NAACP probably got involved in some areas that need a little bit more attention that I wasn't involved in. I am a member of the NAACP. So many things happen outside of my scope of vision. And that's worked out pretty good.
maybe you could tell me a little bit about meeting Mrs. Forrest and courting her, how you met her.
Oh my, that was an adventure. Best thing ever happened to me in my life. We've been good friends, sweethearts, husband, wife, mother of my children, 67 years. And I met her, I think, because Leonardtown, in my early courting days, was a mecca of black socializing. Her mother owned and operated a hotel in Leonardtown. And when any events happened in Leonardtown, like March Court, or any event that was happening at the courthouse, black people usually stayed or had their meals at my mother-in-law's hotel. And of course, like a young fella, you looking around, you know, see what's happening. And one of her friends introduced me to her. And of course, from that introduction, our chemistry must started working pretty good, because I took a liking to her, and I was hoping she'd take a liking to me too, and eventually she did. And I think we courted, I reckon, about, I don't know, 3 years maybe. I was working down in St. Mary City too when this courtship started. And then, of course, we decided that one of the other of us decided that we ought to get married. And I said, yeah, that's a pretty good idea, I think. So I made the proposal, and she accepted, and here we are. But she's a wonderful woman. She's brought me through many rough spots. And I don't usually talk about this too much, but we both have the right chemistry working. Heart's very outspoken. If you cross her path, she'll tell you what she got on her mind. I think about it a little while before I tell you. And it works good. Works good because she sometimes speaks things that after I've thought about them, I say, I'd have said that before you did, but it didn't happen. But she's just like with this house. She was up this morning cleaning and wiping and dusting and all. You got company coming today, and I said, well, all right, that's all right, but that's not her way. That's not her way. And of course, you can look around here and tell that she's I tease her sometimes, I call her Miss Ep. But she's a good woman. And her family knows that, and they respect it too. And I can't really say too much about her, because she's been such a good woman for this family. See, I don't know if she ever told you or not, but we got 5 children, 4 boys and a girl. And none of them in jail. And I hope none of them on dope. So she's been a good leader. She's been a good leader. I just can't help from thinking about it and saying things that I feel about her. She's been good for me.
I have a bunch of questions here that would kind of fall into the realm where Mrs. Forrest would end up back in here, and I want to focus on you today.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, we talked about family, and Were there other community activities you were in? I know you mentioned NAACP, other clubs or social groups that you participated in.
Let me see what else. What else did we do? That was probably it. The NAACP and these different organizations. I don't know whether you would call them organizations or not. Committees were set up to study certain issues in the county, like Charlotte Hall, the hospital, school. And that was about it, I reckon, that I can remember. Of course, there was so much stuff going on. We were involved in the school system just about the better part of our life, or living in this area. That's about it.
How do you feel about life in general? Talk about the general changes throughout your lifetime, what it was like to now. Is it better now?
Oh, yes, it's better. But, you know, that's a question that is kind of hard to define, because there come another. Okay, now you have to keep quiet. It's like when you're talking about comparing something. If you want to get a real reaction to that, you have to have something to compare it with. See, growing up, everybody was poor. So, you know, how do you react to that? Everybody's poor. And what affects me affects you, because we're all in the same boat together. And as you grow older, as things change, as you become more aware of conditions that surround you, for an example, having electricity. We never had it before, but we got it now. And somebody will say, how?
Okay, you were telling me about how times were
How
different.
things have changed. And things become affordable because your lifestyle changes. For example, when you go from $30 a month to $36 a week, everything changes. I can afford more. I can do more, have more. My whole life changes. That doesn't necessarily become better, but it changes. I don't know whether I was any better off when I was living in the ridge, getting water out of the spring, than I'm living up here in Leonardtown with a faucet turned on. I don't know whether I'm any better off. I know I can afford it now. In those days I couldn't. That's it. I have not, physically haven't changed any. I'm still the same James Forrest in 1921 that I am in 2003. Physically, I'm the same thing, same person. I think a little bit further in matters, but I haven't changed any. And I look at some things, and I would really like to study philosophy. I'm very interested in philosophy. You know, sometimes we as human beings get carried away. I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. But how do they get this air that we breathe? Who gives it to them? You don't own it. I don't own it. President Bush don't own it. It's here. But yet we get so involved in this is mine. This land, I didn't make 1 ounce of that dirt out there. But I'm using it. And I get, sometimes I get carried away and people say, well, you better shut up. But I'm just giving you the facts of life. We get involved in our self-worthiness. And we forget that we are just a speck on this earth. Just a speck. But yet I own this. I own it. You don't own nothing. It's here and you use it, but you don't own nothing. And I bet because I get kind of get carried away sometimes. But that's the way I see things. And maybe I see that because I'm getting older. That might have something to do with it. But I do think sometimes I sit there myself and just think how insignificant we are. Just a speck of mortal on this earth, and yet we get so high-powered that, my God, I can. And just like that, you're gone. Gone. And I'm philosophizing now, but that's the way I feel. Somebody get this tape. That old man must have been crazy.
Okay, we were talking about how times have changed. You talked about the economic impacts and whether or not your lifestyle had changed. Do you think it's changed in other ways, for the good or for the bad? I know earlier you mentioned that you respected your elders. Do you think that has changed?
Oh yeah. It has changed. And I don't have a barometer. But I do think sometime, and I don't think I pondered on it, some of the philosophers, the older people who has seen better times, worse times than I have. Like I had an uncle that used to live up the road the other way. Very down to earth man. He was very, what would you say? Our term is very old timerish. And he used to come by here sometime with a hole on his shoulder. I had a hole on his shoulder going down to work people's gardens. And he said to me, he said, you know one thing, boy? He said, machinery is going to be the ruination of man. I said, what in the world is that old man talking about? But if you look at that real seriously and look deep, maybe something to it. Maybe something to it. But we don't know that. We just surmising those things. But I think about them things. And I reckon I go into a realm that I don't know nothing about. But there's certain philosophy that these old people had that made sense. Not to us, because we are so, what would you call it? Commercialized or whatever it is, whatever this new age is, computerized, press a button, you got a message in Florida. One time it took 5 months to get a message there. But I don't know. Just sitting here talking to you, these things come to my mind.
Do you think children are different today?
Children are different?
Do you think they are? And tell me how.
Basically, children are no different. Basically. But because of the information that's available to them, makes them seem different. Had I been exposed to the same things that children are being exposed to now, I'd been just like them children, just like these children. It wouldn't been no different. That's the only difference. Basically, I say basically, all human beings are the same. It's the exposure that they get makes them change. That's my opinion.
So, looking back in your perspective, tell me about, you've traveled to other places, tell me about living in the county. Do you think that was a good place for you? Do you think there were other opportunities you missed out on?
I've done a lot of traveling. St. Mary's County has been good for us. Very good. Been very good for us, been very good to us. I have no solid evidence to prove what I'm going to say. But in my opinion, we've been very fortunate in so many ways. This family, and I'm sure other families would say the same thing, I've had great comfort in St. Mary's County. I've had some good experiences. I've had some good jobs. And I've got a fair wages, or I've received fair wages, which made it possible for me to do certain things for my family. It's like my wife was saying about education. We had one time had 3 children in college at one time. Some of them got grants, some of them worked, and we provided the rest for them, which was good, And out of that experience, we can see the results. It's like that young fellow coming here a while ago. Now he's a district deputy of St. Mary's County. And I think that was made available to him because he had the opportunity to get education. And I think we were the kind of undercurrent to make that happen. And there are other people who've done the same thing. Now, I'm not taking any credit away from anybody. I'm just giving you our experience. And we've had one or two rough spots along the way. But fortunately, we overcame them. And now we're kind of sitting here talking to you on an interview of what happened. We don't know exactly how it happened, but we know it happened, which is good. St. Mary's County, I'll tell anybody I've been to, I reckon half of the United States. I've been to Germany, been to Rome. None of those places that I didn't stay too long, but was compatible to St. Mary's County. She's been a wonderful place for us. Now, I don't care what nobody says.
Tell me how you feel about the growth in the county, the direction the county's been heading, the dependence, for instance, on the defense economy. Tell me how you feel about that.
Now, well, the way I feel really doesn't matter. And to control it, it's impossible. But personally, I would have liked to seen a little less growth. And I'm being, what would you say, prejudiced, because I'm looking at it from a selfish point of view. And I use that word selfish because there are other young people who needs the developments that are happening in St. Mary's County. But I suppose I've sort of become complacent because I'm comfortable. And that isn't right. We can't, it's like genie in the box. You read that story. Once you open that box up and let them out, you can't put them back in there no more. But they were all right as long as they was in there. But once they got out, as the old fellow used to say, it was hell to tell the captain. And you can't control these things. But my concern, not for me, but for my great-grandchildren, how much is left of this resources that we enjoy? That bothers me. But what can you do about it? There's got to be a cutoff point somewhere Oil's got to run out, water's got to run out, land's got to run out. Unless we send them to Mars or Jupiter somewhere or another. It's just practical, good common sense. Where, say, 50 years ago you had, what? Very small population in St. Mary's County. Plenty of everything. Water, land. Now, every now and again, the government will say we got to ration water, getting low. Those things kind of, you look at it and say, what will happen to my great-grandchildren? How will they survive? And that's simple. Well, I won't say simple either, because it's not simple. Maybe our technology will be so advanced that we can do something about that. But I got my doubts. I got my doubts. But there'll always be a way, I hope.
About the defense industry and our dependence on it.
It's important. It has changed the way of life in St. Mary's County. And unless unless our scientists and people with more knowledge than I have make some preparation, we're going to be in trouble. Because we're dependent entirely on the outside structures. We're not independent anymore. See, one time when I was coming along, hell, it didn't make no difference to me if it snowed for a month. I had enough flour in the barrel to feed me. But now if it snows a month, you're going to be in trouble because you can't get no bread out the stores. Trucks can't get down here. And all those things. And I suppose they affect older people because they look at life a little bit different. They don't worry about tomorrow. Hell, it'll be all right. And we old people say, well, how you feel it's going to be all right? Can't be all right if it's not there. But see, just like electricity, for example. I was talking to my daughter the other day about electricity. We don't really think sometimes how dependent we are on electricity. If that electricity goes off, I don't have no heat, don't have no water, and if I haven't put something in the icebox, I have no food. But as growing up as a boy, didn't have no electricity, didn't depend on it. We were independent, but that independence is gradually losing its power. And I'm philosophizing again.
That's good. Here's a good one. Can you tell us, what do you consider the most valuable thing you ever had?
The most valuable thing I've had, my health. That's the most valuable thing I ever had was my health.
And Mrs. Forrest?
Oh, yeah. And the children, I don't leave them out, and grandchildren.
All right, I wanted to ask you about awards, recognitions. What can you recall throughout your lifetime, special awards or recognitions you've received, appointments? We already touched a few. I know we mentioned the state.
You know, I've had so many people who felt that I deserved, or we deserved, awards. I got a box full upstairs. If I could sell them, I'd be a millionaire. And evidently, and I say this with humility, somebody that I've contacted or came in contact with must have felt that he deserved it. Well, he did something that affected me, so I'm going to do something that will kind of help him along the way. And that's the way I look at it. All that stuff on that wall, I don't know if you haven't seen it or not, but there's pictures. Just like now, for an example, somebody felt that a school needed to be named after me. I don't know why. I could not put my hand on any specific point and say, look, that's why I deserve that. I can't do it. Somebody thought so. I'm grateful for it. And I'm certainly appreciative of it. But, Mr. Lewis, if I would try to give you an example as to why that should have been, I can't do it. Just can't do it, that's all. And when I my term on the school board had expired, I bet you I got a box full of trophies and plaques from the governor and the president. And somebody must, I know he don't know me personally. Somebody might have told him. But I say somebody must have thought, that fellow must be doing something. Or somebody thinks he's doing something, fooling somebody. I don't know what is happening. But it's there, there's proof right there. I didn't print none of them. And I didn't ask for any of them, but I appreciate it. I accept them. I don't misunderstand them. I don't want this to say that fellow's talking at the big gate. You ever heard that expression? I'm not talking at the big gate. I'm talking from my heart. I've tried to be as honest as I could. Sometimes, you get honesty and truthness mixed up. You go overboard. See, a fellow said to me one time, said, don't jump overboard until you know how deep the water is. and these things just happen to me, Mr. Lewis. I don't. It's just like when you asked me about this interview, I said, well, now look, what else can I say? I used to go around and I call it preaching to the schools on black history. And these were schools integrated in, blacks and whites were already in place. And I would tell them, I got a book upstairs with black history in it. And I used to keep well abreast of it, what was in there and what was happening. And I'd tell them about these things, what happened, what we as blacks had done, that they were not aware of it. A lot of people not aware of what accomplishments we've made. And I thought that it was important that they knew that, or they had some knowledge of it. And people would call me up and said, Mr. Forrest, I'd like for you to come and talk to the children today on black history. And I was glad to do it. I was young then, had a powerful voice. Hell, I could holler loud. But as you get older, these things they get old. You've done so much, you say, look, what's the use of me doing it? Let another fellow take a shot at it. And that's where life has been for me. I've been very fortunate, and I can't say it enough. And a lot of people will say, well, look, God has been good to me. He's been good to a lot of people, not only me. He's been good to a lot of people. And a lot of people get the strength from that. I don't know. So much stuff has happened good for this family. And we kind of stand in awe when it's going to run out. Sometimes it do. I used to go visit the nursing home. That was one of my, I don't say pet obligations, but I enjoyed going to the hospital, going to the nursing home, talk to people. But then I got so depressed when I left, I stopped going because so much misery there. And you sometimes see that vacant chair over there and you say, look, Jim Forrest, that might be your chair. Be careful. And you just say, well, look, I'm going to slack off for a little while. Those are the kind of things that I don't know, I feel proud of, that I've had a part of it. And I just like people. I don't know. I don't know of a single person that I dislike. I got a lot of people I don't agree with, but I've heard people say, I hate so-and-so. I don't hate nobody. I really don't. And I don't know anybody that I'm got a grudge against. Well, I feel sometimes that maybe I'd like to have a little bit more. Years ago, not now, because I don't need nothing. But you, in your life going along, you say, this fella got a brand new car. Damn, I'd like to have a brand new car. And I don't think that's being prejudiced or being aggravated because he's got it. You just feel that I'd like to have that too. I don't know. That's my life.
Tell me some more about the box upstairs. What other awards are in
Oh,
there? What other groups?
my goodness. I haven't been in that box for so long. I don't know, people just give me stuff, that awards that I received from different organizations. Well, 2, 3 of them in there. One of them got a press release. I don't know why they gave it to me, but they gave it to me. Somebody must have thought I wanted it. And stuff that people just when we were married 50 years, all this stuff. I sell it and I'd pay my income tax with it. Ain't no good to us now. But it's here. Now that's part of our family right there on that wall. There's see that one up top? That's my great-grandma. That's the woman that raised me. The one far over, the woman dressed in that Indian costume, that's her daughter. And the one next over this way, that's my mother. And that's my father down at the bottom. And I sit in there and listen to them, talk to them sometimes. They don't answer me, but they talk to them just the same. And a lot of this stuff right here, people must have thought something. And of course, this on this side, that's my wife's great-grandmother there. That's my wife's and sisters and brothers. And of course, I don't know who that fella is standing up there with that short coat on. But anyway, that's some of the stuff that is gathered around us. Yep. Folks, it's been a good road. A little rough in spots, but been good.
So, a few years back, you were recognized at St. Mary's College with a Doctorate of Letters, I believe it was.
Doctor of Humanities.
Doctor of Humanities,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me. Tell me a little bit about that. How did you feel? What was it like?
Well, it was a surprise. And when I first got the notice, I put it in the trash can because I thought it was some kind of an advertisement that they wanted. I don't know, I get so much advertisement. So then she called, what was the lady's name? I forget her name now, but anyway. She called some of the children, asked did I get in the mail. And they asked me, I said, yeah, I got something from down in college, but I put it in the trash can. So he told whoever he was talking to told him, and they sent me another invitation. And I responded to that one, but I just thought it was something that, some kind of invitation or something, or some kind of advertisement, because I didn't really realize the importance of it. And today, I don't know who put my name in. And maybe it's just well that I don't, but you wonder about them things. Or you wonder why you deserve it. Be frank with you. Somebody must have thought so. That's quite an honor. You know, the children tease me sometimes. They get a lot of kick out of my. Sometimes I get carrying on with them. So the youngest son say, we're lucky I got 2 doctors in the family. See, my granddaughter's a doctor too. She's a doctor of pharmacy. And I said, yeah, but she's a real doctor. I'm just yeah. So says a lot of good things happen to this family. And you still try to look back in your bag of tricks and try to figure out why it happened. And I'm sure it happened to a lot of other families too. But I just hadn't been the one that you're interviewing.
Tell me a little bit more about that day. You got dressed up, the family was there. Tell me about that. Who was there? And
What was that on there?
the day you received the
Oh my goodness, that was well, it was 2 days of it. First, which I think it happened on I'm trying to think whether it was on a Saturday or Sunday. But anyway, they had a dinner first. And there were a lot of dignitaries were there, and they were sitting around. There were a lot of professors there. I mean, heavy shooters, PhDs, and MDs, and all the other D's mixed up there together. I was kind of overshadowed by all this knowledge. And you feel very humble because you said, look here, Forrest, you come out of Ridge under a place they call Taylor's Hill, and now you sitting up here with the doctors and professors and the lawyers and physicians. What are you doing up here? And you had no answer for it. So I don't know. Somebody just said you ought to be there. And here you are. And of course I had my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and children, friends, neighbors. And I don't know, you just feel overwhelmed. You feel so humble because you know within your heart you haven't done any more than anybody else. And people just picked you out of a bunch and put you up here on this pedestal and said, look at him. Him sitting up there. Do you deserve it? Did you work for it? Why is it there? You don't have no answer for it. You just say, I've lived my life. And come the ebb and the flow of the tide. And here you are. And then you look back in your life, and it's like, I always like to mention this man because he was an inspiration to me. This is Daniel, the man that was the principal of the Cardinal Gibbons Institute. Evidently, he saw something in me that I didn't know was there, because he picked me out and kind of pushed me along. And there were 50 other boys there that didn't push along. And it's scary sometimes. Sometimes you said, makes me tremble sometimes when you think about it seriously. Why did that man pick you out? Was that what they call it, predestination? I don't know. But it happened. See, those are the facts. Those are the facts. That man made it possible for me to have a house over in Hollywood. He built a house. I say he, the institution, built a house, brand new house. Set me up in the chicken business. I raised chickens over in Hollywood till the Depression came and things went bad. And you know, I'm sitting here maybe boring you with things that happen to me, and you say to yourself, why? Why did it happen to you? What did you do to deserve it? I don't know. I really don't know. I accept it, I respect it, but why it happened, I don't know. And it kind of makes you feel a little or more humble when you really think about these things seriously. That's,
Okay, this is meant to be very open-ended also. Have you done everything you wanted to do in your life? Is there something else that you'd like to get done or wished you had time to do? You mentioned philosophy, studying philosophy.
you know, sometimes you wish you had paid more attention to your education than you did. Because as you go through life, there's so many areas that you would like to have more knowledge of. Philosophy would have been my goal in life. I believe I was the word called prognosticator. I just look at human beings and try to understand them. What makes them tick. And there's another expression, sometimes you try to see around the curve. Hard to do, but I like human beings. That's the best way I can put it. I just like people. I like to study them. I like to wonder why they do what they do. Wonder what their interest is. For an example, I take about you. I said, now, why does Mr. Lewis follow the line of work that he's doing, interviewing people? What's behind that? There must be some gratification that he gets from doing that. What is it? What drives him? And this is not personal. I don't know whether you make a salary or whether you do it because you're inspired by some feeling that you don't know what it is. But you do it. And I'm sure that if you were in the professional world and you were doing this on the basis of dollars and cents, it would cost you a lot of money. Or it would cost me a lot of money to have you do it. And I think about those kind of things. It don't amount to a row of beans, but I think about it just the same. I don't know whether you follow what I'm saying or not.
I follow. Okay, I want to ask you if there is some story you'd like to tell me that would be a story that you would tell to your great-grandchildren. If there is, I mean, if there's something you'd feel comfortable telling me. A family story, or...
Well, you know, I don't do much of it now, but I used to tell these children tales. You know, years ago, when we didn't have television, telephones, radios, and all that kind of stuff, we had to make up our own stories. You know, there was a man called him Uncle Remus. You ever heard of that? He talked about Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox. You ever heard of that?
No, tell me about it.
I don't know whether you're not pulling my leg now, are you?
No, tell me about it.
See, I used to tell the children that years ago when I was coming along, we made up our stories. Animals used to talk. And that was a way of communication. And I used to tell them tales about Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox, how they made a living, how they lived, And you see, I told him a tale one time about this tar baby. This man had a spring, and every time he'd go down the spring was muddy. You know, children play in the spring, you know, and make it muddy. You don't know about that, but see, years ago there was a natural source of water that we call a spring, and I suppose it's the gravity of the earth that pulls water to the surface. We call them springs, and I'm sure you know about that. I'm not telling you anything new. But they are gradually fading away now. I think that the pressure on the water that we use is taking that pressure away from that force. Then we all used to have what they call artesian wells on the seashores where water just continued to flow all the time. I've been doing it for 1,000 years, I reckon. But now getting back to this tale. And this fellow said, I'm gonna catch whoever has been coming down here mudding my springs up. He said, I'm gonna put a tar baby down there and catch him. So the rabbit was the one that was doing it. So he come down the spring, this rabbit come down the spring this morning. He saw this tar baby sitting. He said, good morning. Tar baby didn't say nothing to him. He spoke again, he still didn't say nothing to him. He said, I'll make you say something. So he struck him. Pow, hand got stuck, couldn't get away. He said, I got another one. Struck him again, stuck, couldn't get away. He said, I got a foot. He kicked him, that got stuck, the other one got stuck. So the next morning when the man come down to his spring, he found Brer Rabbit had got stuck to the tar baby. And he said, said, you the one that's been messing my spring up. So old rabbit, he started pleading and crying, said, oh, please don't hurt me. He said, please don't hurt me. He said, please don't throw me in the briar bushes. Throw me in the fire, but don't throw me in the briar bushes. So, of course, the old man done just the opposite. He threw him in the briar bushes. And, of course, when he threw him in the briar bushes, rabbit laid down, throwed up both legs, so that's where I was bred and born, in the briar bushes. And stuff like that, just sitting down, having fun with them. And we have a lot of fun. They laugh, and I enjoy telling them. And that was, real life.
Okay, we'll come back to your lifestyle. Can you tell me how you and others in the county kept informed? You mentioned they didn't have television. What source of news did you have?
Well, you have to think about the period in which you're talking about. When I was a child, they had a paper called The Grit, old newspaper. And I don't know if it come out of New York, Baltimore, or something else. And my aunt, who had a fairly good education, could read, and she would read the news to us. Just whatever happened in New York or wherever it happened, and they put in this grit, she would, she would get a little drink of water. She would read it to us. And then on Sundays, when people went to church, they would talk about the farmers or the pigs or the cows, the chickens, and just a general country conversation. And that was it. And then the post office was a meeting place. Mail time around 12 o'clock, the mail would come, you'd go to the post office. Probably didn't get anything, but you'd go anyhow. And that was kind of a community gathering. And of course, like you said, there wasn't no telephones. Well, in fact, the average person, and doctors might have a telephone, stores. Very few local people had a telephone. Of course, wasn't no wires. 2 wires going down the road, that's all it was. Then in later years, they started putting in a little more wires, a little cable, and then that was in the 40s. Then everybody got all the information, needing more too.
So, as you were a child or a young man, what do you remember as some of the big stories that were going on, things outside the county?
Well, there were a lot of talk as a youngster, the Titanic. A lot of people talked about that in the conversation, because it was 1911. When was Titanic? When was it? 1909? I don't know. It's been a long time ago, 90-some years ago. But it was news to us then because it was just getting to us. It probably was 5 or 6 years old. But we were kind of just getting the real information, the Titanic. There was a lot of stories told about that big ship. And then as time went on, they got into World War One. People coming home from, say, 1918. See, I was 7 years old, something like that. And people talking about young men coming back from the army and their experience over in France and mustard gas and things like that. We youngsters, of course, we weren't allowed to get in on all the information. You kind of had to sit back a little bit, let the old folks talk, and they'd be talking about it. See, you had uncles and nephews and things that was in the service, and they'd come back and tell tales. I don't know whether they were tales either, information. That was something new too, taking these boys off the farm, taking them into big cities and stuff. It was quite an experience. Yep.
And as a young man, the Depression came along. Was that news, or everything just seemed about the same?
No, it was news. It was news. Depression changed a lot of things. And it had an impact in St. Mary's County. Not as great, because I don't remember ever being hungry and owning, I say not me, but my grandfather and grandmother owned their own property. I didn't have to move. See, during the Depression, people couldn't make it on the farm. They had to move. If you couldn't produce on the farm, you had to go somewhere else. And a lot of movement was going on during the Depression. But in this area, or in the area that I was born, we fared pretty well, according to the times. There's a lot of stories told about the Depression, but it didn't involve us too much.
Okay, we're talking about newsworthy events. We got into the Depression, the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Time of Jim Crow laws in Maryland. Can you recall hearing news or discussion about the heightened segregation during that time and the Jim Crow laws?
That I know there was a law, Jim Crow law, but in my experience, I never had much dealing with it. I really didn't. See, I was in the 30s, just like I said, 1933 was the tercentenary of Father Andrew White coming to St. Mary City, 1633. I was working down in St. Mary City. So the Depression, where it affected a lot of people, didn't affect me or didn't affect us because I had a job. But it did affect a lot of people. You know, I've always, I reckon I could take a piece of paper on a page and write for you the jobs that I've had. I've had many jobs.
We're going to do that.
I worked at Point Lookout Hotel. You ever heard of that?
No,
Never heard of Point Lookout Hotel?
no.
Fascinating place. My gosh. You need to get some history on that. Point Lookout Hotel was the largest, and I say this without too much authority, buildings in the lower part of St. Mary's County. It was where the aristocrats came from Washington, Baltimore, spent their vacation at Point Lookout Hotel. You check with I'll tell you what, what's the lady's name down at St. Mary's College? She's a historian too. She'd done a lot of work in the 40s on living in St. Mary's County. Dr. Hammond. You ever heard of her?
Yes.
Well, I'm sure she's got some information on Point Lookout Hotel. I worked down there as a waiter. I was in school, but during the summertime, I'd go down there and wait tables. It was very, very exclusive place. As the expression goes, well, no riffraffs in there. You had them dollar bills. Yeah, I worked at Point Lookout Hotel. I worked at, as I said a while ago, St. Mary's City. I worked for a telephone company. Done a little farming, raising tomatoes. I came to Leonardtown. I worked at the Hotel St. Mary's. That was a big place too. Three stories. You heard of that? St. Mary's Hotel. I shined shoes in Leonardtown on the streets. Got my shoe shine stand out in the woodshed now. And I was work orientated. I could find a job. I done a little carpenter work, painting, cooking, done anything. I've done jobs that out of existence now, I reckon.
Okay, you talked about in the post-war era as a young man. Actually, I asked you to talk about it. I don't think you had a whole lot to say. The heightened Jim Crow laws, the heightened segregation atmosphere in St. Mary's County at that time. You were just a young man when that started, I guess. I'm going to end by asking you if throughout your lifetime, especially think about that era then, throughout your lifetime, did you ever feel threatened because you were an African American male?
Threatened in what way? Physically?
Physically, mentally, emotionally challenged in some way?
Oh, well, once you were denied certain rights, certainly that's a threatening atmosphere because, you go into a place and you're unaware of it. See, they don't have a big sign up there saying we don't serve you. You go in there and this particular incident happened to me when I was working for a telephone company. He wasn't a friend of mine, but he was a worker with me, and we went in this place to get a sandwich for lunch. And we both sat on the stool, and the lady came out, and he ordered. And I ordered, she said, "I'm sorry, I can't serve you." Well, it was embarrassing to start with. And of course it threatens you. It's so demeaning because I hadn't done anything wrong. I just asked for a sandwich. And he said, "Well, if you can't serve him, you can't serve me either." And those kind of things, they just make you feel so, I don't know, you just feel like, I can't find a word that would properly express how you feel. You feel humiliated. You feel embarrassed to start with. The first thing happens, so you're embarrassed first. Then you get aggravated. You say, why am I being treated this way? Then you stop and think about it seriously and say, well, look, that's the law. And you really can't hold that person that told you that totally responsible, because she or he is doing it because she's instructed to do it from her boss man. See, if you look at that approach, it kind of smooths the waters a little bit. And I'm sure, and I feel I'm sure, that it's some of those people who would serve me had it not been for their boss saying, look, don't serve that black man. And you feel it's kind of hard to interpret your feelings fully, because you do get aggravated, and you stop and think, well, hell, I'll go somewhere else and get a sandwich. I ain't gonna let it worry me. And you really have to be careful, because it's like a sore. It'll keep festering. After a while, it'll turn to ptomaine poison. You have to cut your finger off. Those are the kind of approaches that I've taken in life, and it helped me a lot, because I've been some kind of aggravated sometimes. And then you sit back and say, well, now look, that's a law, and it's a custom. You have to approach it a different way if you want to get any results. We've had quite a few embarrassing moments. I call them embarrassing, but it's law. And sometimes you look at those things not from a standpoint of being aggravated, but just from a humanitarian point. Saying, now look, this guy ain't done nothing. I ain't robbed no bank, ain't done something to somebody to aggravate him. I'm just being attacked because I'm black. That's the only reason. And it gets frustrating sometimes. And of course, it's hard for you to be in my shoes, but sometimes when you look at this thing straight in the eye and say, look, I didn't make myself black, I didn't bring myself here, and it's wrong, and I'm tired, I'm gonna do something about it. Depends on how you're gonna do it. And depending on how you're gonna do it is what results you're gonna get. I've always looked at that. I put that out front. What's my results? I could do a lot of things, but if it doesn't amount to nothing, it ain't worth doing. I don't know whether you follow my thoughts, but that's the truth. You get aggravated, and I think that's maybe some of the frustration of our young blacks today. They're frustrated, and they can't handle it, don't know how to handle it. And not being equipped to handle it, they do foolish things, completely foolish. And it doesn't help the situation, it just makes it worse. But they don't understand that because they're young. You got to have a little age on you. You got to be mellow a little bit sometimes to take a step back and analyze the situation, see how I'm going to work it out. See, that was one of Martin Luther's successes. He stepped back a minute and thought about it. Said, look, if I kill that fella, there'd be 5 more coming to take his place. So I better be careful how I kill him. Better wait a while, They don't retaliate. Strong person do that. When you putting dogs on me and washing me with hose and blowing up, killing my children and stuff, it's hard for you not to take a gun and go in and try to kill him. But if you stop and think about it, you say, look, what the results are going to be. And it's a lot to think about. And a lot of us have thought about these things. Some of us have been accused of saying, oh, you too easy. You ought to have done this, you ought to have done that. Maybe we should have, I don't know. But that's what over the dam. What over the dam. We've had a lot of, and of course, that's what I say about my wife. Now, my wife wouldn't have been able to, she wouldn't be able to handle some of these things. She would have rebelled and became more frustrated, in my opinion, which sometimes don't amount to much. But we've made a good team. We've come through a lot of trying times. I'm gonna give you this one story, and then I'm gonna give you no more. In our church, we were forced to sit behind. You see, that was frustrating. And you look at that thing, you say, look, now here's an institution that's trying to follow Christian philosophy. And you got two sets of people in there, one black and one white. The same church, same structure. But yet that one that's black is not given the privilege to sit where he wants to sit. He's relegated to the back. And if you analyze that and say, well, now look, there's got to be something wrong here. If this is a Christian community looking at Christian philosophy or Christian teaching, all men are created equal, God-like, or whatever term you want to use, and yet in your house, where you're the leader, and you said, look, you're black, you can't come up here, you sit in the back. And when you think about that, think deep, you said, you get upset. You get upset. But if you take a step back and say, well, look, let's work on this thing a little bit and see if we can't make some sense out of this thing that doesn't make any sense. And finally, it's worked out. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. And you can take it from me, it wasn't easy. But here I am. And you look at this thing as how asinine. 30 years ago, I couldn't sit in the front of the church. And 30 years later, I'm a minister of that same church. I'm giving out sacraments to people in that same church. And analyze that and just look at it and put it up on the wall and look at it and say, how foolish it is. So there's some of the changes. And they're good changes. But if you want your children, and maybe if you want the world to see how foolish it was, and put it up on the screen and just compare them. Say now 30 years ago, that same man, ain't no change. He skin's the same color. He's the same weight, looks the same. That had to sit in the back, and now he's up on the altar with the minister of that church, giving out Holy Communion or officiating in their activities. So I'm not going to keep on talking about it, but I do think about it. I don't get frustrated anymore, but I do think about it. And I don't talk to these children too much about it because young people, they're not seasoned enough to take all these things, and they retaliate, which sometimes isn't the right thing to do. So I kind of put a little frosting on the cake before I give it to them. I don't give them all the stuff that we've gone through so that they have the privilege of being accepted Because that's what it is, being accepted in these different phases of life. So,
Thank you, Dr. Forrest.